How real is this flat world? Some things to consider. Let's start off with a bold statement, one that some of you have heard me say over the last 5 years. If the world is flat and it's enclosed, then it's probably digital. I say digital because the word virtual seems to have lost its meaning, like artificial intelligence or smart when referring to electronics. Digital may seem like an older term, but it still applies. Why does this make perfect sense to me? Well, for starters, I'm older and had the pleasure of working in the tech field since its infancy. I was one of the first kids at my university to have their own computer. I played video games for a living during the 90s and then taught proprietary software for the better part of 20 years. The short version is I know what the industries have been striving to do for decades, and it is the one aspect of our future that has almost reached its potential. Most of what was promised to us since we started building machines has never been realized. No one has flying cars or ray guns or robot servants. I suppose there are special military programs that have achieved some of these goals, but the general public will never see them for various reasons. Flying cars are too risky, ray guns are way too dangerous, and robot servants, well, you've seen the movies. No happy endings there. The one ladder we did scale was information technology, or IT. That progressed very quickly, and the leaps we made in that arena were astounding. We have basically put small computers in just about everything, and the large ones have been dedicated to creating virtual worlds, or what I like to call the ultimate escape. Maybe it's the only true escape. Human beings seem to be designed to want escapism. We've all heard that. It comes in various forms, from alcohol to drugs, and yes, many different kinds of entertainment. Anything that distorts or triggers our suspension of disbelief qualifies. Suspension of disbelief is, by the way, the reason why you get emotional when you watch television, movies, or even read a book. Drugs and alcohol are kind of a poor man's virtual reality and doesn't require much thought. They smudge the canvas of our world and give the illusion that you are somewhere else. The stronger the drugs, the stronger the illusion. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Books, television, and movies require some imagination, and a good story in any form can transport you to another world, but you have to buy into it. If the story isn't realistic, the effect doesn't work. What all entertainment has been striving to do since the 1990s is to create an immersive experience. One that can transport you but requires no suspension of disbelief, no buy-in. We've had some interesting revelations during the evolution of these software simulations. The first is that almost all groups or companies use the same programming techniques. Just about every piece of 3D software that has been created, be it Fortnite, Minecraft, GTA, and all earlier titles, are all built on a flat, enclosed world, similar to a cake box. In fact, everything you see above you in these realms uses what is known as a skybox system. Even those that display a dome-like structure have to eventually square off the edges, which is why I keep using the word box. Computers still can't do some of the things that we do. One is, of course, be self-aware. We will get into that later. Another is that computers can't draw true circles. Not because they aren't smart enough to do it, it's because we haven't figured out a way to tell them how to do it. That's something to think about. If you zoom in on any circle drawn by a computer, it will start to get pixelated or square off into right angles. The same goes with large areas. Eventually, you have to draw a straight edge border. Why? It's more efficient. We can create illusions of spherical things like the moon and other planets, but up close they are always just bunches of little boxes. The same goes for the flatness of these realms. They are all built using a perfectly flat base. Mountains and valleys are of course added for texture, but the outer edges are always perfectly level with each other. Why? Because programming a curvature is much more complex. Developers are notoriously efficient, and the player isn't going to notice anyway. People don't notice the missing curve in simulations because they never see it in real life either. The curve of the real Earth is supposed to be 8 inches per mile squared, but it is only assumed. See what I'm doing here? This also happens in some simulations, Warcraft being the perfect example. The game itself is built on a perfectly flat framework, originally designed in 2004, but Warcraft globes that included continents were added to various rooms in later versions, and that subtle reinforcement worked. Now, younger players think the world of Warcraft is built on a globe framework. We believe the world that is presented to us. That line is from the now 20-year-old movie The Truman Show, which proposed that people born into a created reality will believe anything that is told to them by the authority. Other movies have attempted to show us the potential of virtual worlds, the most high-profile being the Matrix trilogy, which started in 1999, otherwise known as the greatest year in movies. Probably the most thought-provoking was a lesser-known movie from 1999 called The 13th Floor. It was a remake of a 1973 German film called World on a Wire, which was itself based on a 1964 book called Simulacron 3. As you can see, we've been thinking about this ultimate escape long before computers were even a common term. I'm going to spoil the movie for you, but please do watch it anyway. People in a company that creates virtual worlds discover that they also are living inside a virtual world. And yet, outside the movie, in our real world, as we inch closer to creating our own perfect simulations, we have already started seeing hints that maybe, just maybe, this place isn't what we first thought it was. The most obvious is the double slit experiment, which seems confusing when you read it. I'll give you the super simple version. Have you ever made a face at someone when they aren't looking, then they turn your way and you make your face normal again? That happens all around us, all the time, to everything. Ask any scientist and they will avoid the topic, which is interesting considering they were the ones who first discovered it. When you have your back to something, it's not being rendered or drawn at its highest possible quality. When you stare at it or observe it in any way, then it does. Why is this so important? Because this is what we do in simulations right now. If you're playing a character in a building, then everything outside that building is not drawn at all. It's called conservation of resources, and we do it for obvious reasons, because it's more efficient. Why waste computer power? So why is this happening here? Why is this world displaying traits exactly like traits of our own simulation? And if you think that's the strangest clue to where we live, think again. We've discovered something years ago called neuroscience and free will. The test was simple. Tape some sensors to a person's head and have them pick numbers on a computer screen. Have the subject note the time that they decided to pick the number before hitting the keypad. So when I think of the number 3, just then I thought of it. That's one of the ways we define being self-aware, that we can choose these things out of thin air, right? We create thought from nothing. Not so fast. It turns out that the computer could tell when we decided to pick that number 8 seconds before we chose it. Maybe that didn't sink in. Think of a number right now. Now understand that a computer can see that thought process 8 seconds ago. It's not possible. Nothing exists pre-thought, unless, of course, all this isn't really interactive, not really live. If you need to pause for a moment or get a drink, I don't blame you. The next few minutes are going to get pretty weird. Science doesn't believe in predestination or lack of free will. We have the ability to make choices on our own. We decide what we do when we walk through our day, what coffee to drink, where to drive, who to talk to. And even if this was some sort of interactive simulation, that would still make sense. We make choices on the fly in real time. That's how it works. It isn't the most efficient process, however. There is a way of doing all this that streamlines everything, something I like to call the interactive movie. It's like a real-time simulation, only you make most or all of the choices ahead of time. You pre-make all the big decisions, where to grow up, career paths, who to marry, etc. And the simulation fills in all the smaller stuff. You don't have to choose to brush your teeth 25,000 times in your life. After the choices have been made, you block all memory up until that point and enter the movie. The system only has to build the path that you took. If you never chose to go to Africa during your lifetime, the system doesn't fully build it. It's there, of course, but only in reference code. And it gets stranger from there, because then you have to ask about all the other people in here with you. How many of them are actually self-aware or real? And how many are NPCs, otherwise known as non-player character? In the movies, that question seems to be all or nothing. In The Matrix, everyone that walked the streets was a real person that fed the system. In the 13th floor, only the user was real, and everyone else were just millions of apps in human form. Which makes more sense. In most cases, programmers create armies of NPCs to interact with the players because no one wants to be a placeholder program. Everyone wants the freedom to run around and do whatever they want. In massive multiplayer games, there is a huge social aspect, where people interact with each other, but what if that could be simulated as well? What if basic conversation could be, for lack of a better word, simulated? I'm sure you've met people who fit this criteria, and it raises even more questions. There are too many different holes we could dive into here, so I'll try to be blunt. It's very possible, even likely, that the percentage of real people in this world is extremely low. And if you are listening to this and understanding that statement, then you are probably one of them. The rest of the masses milling around, sleepwalking through their lives, are just basic characters, like the ones in the movie Vanilla Sky, especially the last 30 minutes of it. If you are one of the very lucky people who got everything I just said, and had a mind-bending moment where things started to make more sense, then I envy you. To end this rant, I suppose I need to address the why, and there are two of them. Why not reveal the nature of the world to the people when they enter? Why not give them the freedom and unlimited choices in real time? Why hide that? Because I believe that's where you came from originally, a world with unlimited possibilities where freedom was like breathing. This Earth is a world full of conflict and restrictions. It's the opposite. And if you realize that, you would want to leave this place every day after a certain age. That defeats the purpose. You already see what can happen here with that kind of situation. If you've ever known or heard about a trust fund kid, you'll understand. A child is told at a certain age they will inherit millions of dollars when they turn 16 or 21 or whatever. Their motivation then tanks and they eventually self-destruct. Not always, but often. Which is why lawyers advise the parents not to tell the children until after university. It also happens with child actors, royalty, and so on. Last but not least is the other why. Why come here? Why did you volunteer to suffer in this place? It's called dualism, and we all know it in one form or another. How do you know true heat without understanding cold? Pleasure without pain, light without shadow. The truly great worlds that exist outside of here in the boundless beyond can only be appreciated when they are taken away from you. Or, as the song lyric goes, you've got to go through hell before you get to heaven.